For over 100 years, humanity contemplated the golden countenance of a youthful monarch without suspecting what lay hidden beneath. Many of us spent our childhood fascinated by Tutankhamun, although, as the years passed, this interest usually diminished. However, significant events have the capacity to rekindle global curiosity. This phenomenon occurred during the 2022 commemorations, which celebrated the centenary of the understanding of hieroglyphs. At the end of 2024, scientists conducted a quantum scan at the Grand Egyptian Museum after hours, aiming only to perform a routine analysis on Tutankhamun's funerary mask. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Hidden Mysteries in Gold. The golden mask is considered one of the most renowned artistic creations on the planet. However, what emerged in their projections seemed unbelievable. Beneath the symbols that made up Tutankhamun's name, another title lay hidden, obscured, suppressed from the chronology. To whom did it belong, and why was it purposefully veiled? At that moment, the object that enchanted multitudes became a code for an enigma buried for 3 millennia. Could this discovery transform everything we thought we understood about the Golden Age of Egypt? The solutions, latent beneath gold coverings and simulation, are only beginning to emerge. To measure the scale of this revelation, it is first necessary to understand what this mask symbolizes. In November 1922, British investigator Howard Carter made the most magnificent discovery in the history of archaeology. After periods of researching the Valley of the Kings, he located the entrance to a tomb that had remained sealed for more than 30 centuries. When he looked through a tiny hole in the passage and his collaborator asked what he perceived, Carter is said to have murmured, "Fantastic things." And that was an understatement. Inside the tomb lay a treasure beyond imagination. Golden vehicles and ceremonial beds, chests filled with gems and alabaster vessels, effigies of deities and sentinels on perpetual watch, a royal seat covered in gold. And in the burial chamber, inside 3 lavishly ornamented coffins, nested one inside the other like Russian statuettes, lay the corpse of the young leader Tutankhamun. His body, completely covered by hundreds of meters of fabric, had its face protected by a mask of solid gold that would become the most emblematic representation of the classical world. The artifact is, in fact, admirable. It is about 53 centimeters tall and weighs more than 10 kilograms of pure gold, denser than a bowling ball, sculpted into the calm face of a pubescent king. The eyes are adorned with obsidian and quartz, producing a disturbingly regal appearance. The eyebrows and contour are crafted from lapis lazuli, the intense blue gem that the ancient Egyptians prized above almost anything else. Streaks of pigmented glass decorate the royal headdress. A serpent and a vulture, emblems of Upper and Lower Egypt, rise from the forehead, signifying the sovereign's control over the United Territory. For the ancient Egyptians, this was not merely aesthetics, it was mystical science. They believed that gold was the substance of the gods, immortal and perennial. The mask's purpose was to protect the monarch's mummy and help its essence, its Kai, to identify its own physical form in the afterlife. Without this golden face, the king's breath could wander lost eternally, unable to find its way back. On the back of the piece, hieroglyphic rituals from the Book of the Dead are carved into the metal, precepts intended to escort and shield the sovereign on his journey through the underworld. Everything in this item was conceived to ensure its perpetuity, and in a way, it succeeded. 3 millennia later, Tutankhamun is the most celebrated leader who ever lived, his golden face distinguished everywhere on Earth. But almost from the moment of its unveiling, experts noticed details that didn't quite fit. The mask was graceful, yes, splendid, but there was something about it that seemed wrong. The clues were there from the beginning, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to observe carefully enough to notice them. The first obstacle was time. Tutankhamun died suddenly around the age of 19, possibly due to an illness following a serious leg fracture. His passing was unexpected, and in ancient Egypt, unusual deaths generated immense logistical problems. According to Egyptian mystical custom, a pharaoh needed to be preserved and buried within precisely 70 days. It wasn't a recommendation, it was a sacred imposition. This interval corresponded to the time it took for the star Sirius to disappear below the horizon annually, and the Egyptians believed that the sovereign's soul followed a similar path before attaining eternal glory. Consider what had to be done in those 70 days. The corpse had to be cleaned, purified, and treated, an intricate method that included the removal of the viscera, the use of natron, and meticulous wrapping in rolls and rolls of cloth. The tomb needed to be organized, its walls illustrated with paintings of the afterlife, its rooms filled with everything the monarch would need for eternity. 3 coffins had to be assembled and decorated, thousands of objects collected, consecrated, and arranged according to strict rituals. And the death mask, weighing over 10 kilos of pure gold, had to be manufactured from scratch. 70 days for all of that. Contemporary experts estimate that crafting a mask of this standard, even with modern tools, would require months of uninterrupted labor. The Egyptians were skilled artisans, but they worked with metal tools and charcoal kilns. The time frame seemed unattainable, and when archaeologists inspected the tomb, they found evidence that confirmed their suspicions. The burial chamber was tiny, much smaller than those of other kings in the Valley of the Kings. The illustrations on the walls appeared hastily executed, with perceptible lines and unfinished parts. The voluminous rock tomb showed damage to its edges, as if it had been forced to fit into a space that was too small. The scene that emerged was unsettling. This did not resemble the meticulously planned burial of a divine leader. It seemed like an urgent task, a desperate scramble to bury a young man before the sacred boundary ended. And if the eternal dwelling itself was improvised, what about the belongings within? What about the mask? As scholars scrutinized the artifacts more closely, a disturbing pattern emerged. Many items did not appear to have been made for Tutankhamun. Some effigies displayed features distinct from those of the mummy. Certain adornments seemed designed for the body of a lady. Coats of arms bearing royal names showed signs of modification, with one title carved over another. The tomb appeared to be furnished with recycled objects, pieces originally manufactured for another individual and quickly customized for the young sovereign's burial. This wasn't necessarily indecent. Egyptian clerics were pragmatic. If a pharaoh died suddenly and there wasn't time to manufacture new items, they used what was available. The fundamental thing was to perform the rites within the allotted time. But the mask was distinct. It was the most important item of the entire funeral. The countenance that would symbolize the monarch for all eternity. It would be inconceivable to risk something of that magnitude. It was then that the researchers observed the ears. The mask has pierced ears, small holes in the lobes where adornments could be used. In ancient Egyptian art, this was a significant detail. Pierced ears were only displayed on women and infants. A mature pharaoh, especially in a sacred setting like a funerary mask, would never be depicted in this way. The symbolism was completely out of the ordinary. Some experts tried to justify this as a stylistic choice, or as an allusion to the king's youth. But these theories seemed forced. It simply didn't make sense. The shadow of Nefertiti. There was also the mask's own likeness. Comparisons with other images of Tutankhamun showed variations. The jaw was more subtle, the cheekbones were higher. The overall appearance seemed softer, almost feminine. Furthermore, the metal of the face displayed a slightly different coloration from the rest of the piece, with a more reddish tone, suggesting it might have come from another source. A conjecture began to gain momentum, first cautiously in academic circles, then in frank discussions. What if the mask hadn't been made for Tutankhamun? What if it had been created for someone else, someone whose face was removed and replaced with the features of the young king? If this is true, there is only one name that makes sense: Nefertiti. She was the principal royal consort of Pharaoh Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's father, which made her the young monarch's stepmother. But she was much more than a wife. Ancient accounts and images reveal that she acted as co-ruler, being shown defeating opponents and offering prayers to the gods, tasks usually reserved for pharaohs. The famous colored bust of Nefertiti, found in 1912, shows a woman of unusual attractiveness, with prominent cheekbones, a slender neck, and an air of quiet command. But her story ends in enigma. Near the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti simply disappears from the historical annals. Her name vanishes from monuments. Her representation ceases to appear in artistic creations. It is as if she had been removed from reality. For decades, researchers assumed that she had died, possibly a victim of an epidemic that struck the royal palace. However, another hypothesis began to gain traction. Some scholars believe that Nefertiti did not die. They believe that she changed her title and became pharaoh. The evidence is indirect, but persuasive. Nefertiti's disappearance. A new co-ruler appears in the records, ruling alongside Akhenaten under the royal name of Nefer-Nefer-Uaten. The title itself is revealing, as it includes Nefertiti's name. After Akhenaten's death, this sovereign seems to have ruled alone for a brief period before Tutankhamun assumed power. If this assumption is correct, then Nefertiti was not merely a queen. She was a pharaoh in her own right, entitled to all the funerary trappings that this status demanded. including a gold funerary mask. The chronology fits perfectly. Nefertiti would have died shortly before Tutankhamun. Her funerary apparatus would already have been complete. When the young king died unexpectedly, his clergy would have faced an impractical decision: send him to the afterlife without proper protection, or use one belonging to his recently deceased stepmother. The hollow ears, the feminine features, the disparity in the color of the metal. Everything made sense if the mask had been designed for a woman and quickly molded for a man. But this was still merely a theory. Without tactile confirmation that the mask had been modified, it remained a presumption. Until an incident changed everything: the veiled identity of Tutankhamun. In 2014, the world received news that left Egyptologists and museum managers stunned. At the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, during routine cleaning, the golden mask of King Tut was damaged. The ritualistic braided beard, an icon of divine sovereignty that united the pharaoh with Osiris, broke completely. What happened next intensely aggravated the condition. Instead of calling in repair specialists, the museum staff panicked. They grabbed a bottle of epoxy resin, a technical glue used to repair pipes or vehicle components, and reattached the beard. The remaining adhesive was spread across the golden chin, confident that no one would notice. Everyone noticed. The world's greatest historical treasure, which had remained untouched for over 33 centuries, had been damaged with ordinary adhesive. The response was instant and severe. The Egyptian authorities launched an investigation. Collaborators were reprimanded, and a global group of experts, led by the German restorer Christian Ekman, was recruited to remedy the defect and restore the mask to its original condition. Ekman understood that this setback also represented an unparalleled opportunity. For the first time since Howard Carter removed the object from Tutankhamun's body in 1925, the piece could be scrutinized using modern scientific resources. Before properly securing the beard, the group decided to subject the mask to a more thorough investigation of its history. They would use every possible mechanism to definitively answer Nefertiti's question: the X-ray diagnosis. The fundamental technique employed was X-ray fluorescence, known as XRF. This method works by bombarding an item with X-rays, inducing its atoms to emit their own energy. By observing this energy, scientists can establish the exact chemical recipe of the substance, even in minute proportions. Ekman's verdict: if the mask had been replaced, if a new face had been fused onto the original adornment, the analysis would reveal it. Different portions of gold hold distinct chemical marks, small oscillations in the quantities of silver, copper, and other elements. Fusions would appear as diverse chemical strata. Junctions would be perceptible as interruptions in the metal's weave. The team dedicated months to researching every millimeter of the artifact. They investigated the face, the adornment, and the coat of arms with the royal name. They searched for any evidence of alteration. When the reports emerged, the Egyptological community rested soundly. The mask, Ekman stated, was genuine. The gold of the face and the gold of the adornment had the same chemical base. They came from the same batch of metal. There was no evidence of soldering, no veiled joinery, nor any proof that a different face had been glued on. Ekman also presented a refined point. The mask has delicate blue glass adornments around the eyes and on the headdress straps. Glass is brittle. If ancient producers had cast a new face, the method would have required heat above 800 degrees C. This heat would have cracked or liquefied the glass instantly. However, the glass was intact. The outcome seemed certain. The mask was produced as a single block, made exclusively for Tutankhamun. As for the hollow ears, Ekman proposed that they could be an aesthetic rule or a reference to the monarch's childhood. The more subtle features would be an effect of the Amarna artistic trend, common in that era. The variation in metal tone would be an impact of the light or a visual preference. Each flaw had a justification. The Nefertiti hypothesis was rejected. The team meticulously removed the epoxy, reattached the beard using beeswax, the same material the ancient Egyptians would have used, and set the recovered mask. The enigma solved. The matter was settled, except it wasn't. The quantum revelation. To a small group of scholars, Ekman's claims seemed incomplete. The 70-day deadline still seemed utopian. The pierced ears remained a violation of norms, and the fine features still didn't match the countenance of a young sovereign. The technology of the future skeptics argued that the obstacle lay not in the facts, but in the limitations of science. X-rays detect mass and composition. But what if the producers had been more astute than any equipment can perceive? What if the gold used to complete the details had come from the same batch? What if the coat of arms had been hammered and rewritten without adding new metal? What if the face had been modified from behind while the front remained intact? X-rays wouldn't see that. They don't show the caloric trajectory of the metal, they don't display past heating, nor do they detect bonds at the molecular level. To see this, a completely new tactic would be necessary, a science that didn't exist in Ekman's time. In 2024, this science appeared. Quantum resonance imaging, or QRI, resembles a futuristic film. Instead of piercing the item with X-rays, it uses quantum fractions that communicate directly with the atoms. This makes it possible to show not only the chemical formula, but the physical trace of the substance, pressure patterns, fluctuations in the crystalline lattice, and even collages imperceptible by other means. Under the title Project Osiris, scientists and historians obtained approval from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities to read the mask. Formerly, it was merely a technological display. In the early hours of 2024, after the museum closed, the reader was switched on, tracing the atomic map of the piece layer by layer. Hours of reports validated previous perceptions, until the coat of arms appeared. And what the reader revealed there would alter everything we thought we knew about Tutankhamun, and about the object that concealed his mysteries for 3 millennia, the specter in the gold. The first flaw the reader noticed appeared around the edge of the face. The quantum image displayed what the group termed a heat ghost, a molecular signature indicating that the gold in a precise trace had been heated to a different temperature than the adjacent metal. Ekman was correct in saying that a traditional solder would have damaged the glass details, but the ancient producers didn't solder from the face. They fixed the face from behind, employing a high-compression heat technique that kept the front intact. X-rays showed a smooth face. The quantum reader noted the stress patterns that revealed it had been detached and replaced. Then the ears appeared. X-rays indicated pure gold. The quantum reader found 2 exact cylindrical supports, gold rods that had been placed in the original gaps of the ears and then hammered and sanded until they were imperceptible. These supports were made with the same mixture as the rest of the piece, so the X-ray analysis did not detect them. But the quantum reader distinguished disparities in the mesh of the metal granules and in their cooling trail. The ears had been perforated. Someone had plugged those gaps, but it was the coat of arms that brought the ultimate and indisputable confirmation. The X-rays detected only the symbols that spelled out Tutankhamun's name. The quantum reader went deeper, noticing atomic changes beneath the gold's skin. The metal in that area had been hammered, leveled, and polished in a way that didn't appear on the rest of the mask. The primary carving had been erased until it disappeared, its traces eliminated by a zealous and purposeful force. And the quantum reader could achieve something that no past science had ever accomplished. By mapping the microscopic traces of the primary hammering, the faint marks left in the atomic mesh of the gold, it could digitally reconstruct what had once resided there, the legacy of Nefertiti. The group activated the power supply system. Slowly, like an image appearing in a laboratory, the spectrum of primary symbols emerged on the screens. The name that appeared was not Tutankhamun. The name was Nefer-Nefer-Uaten. This was the royal title that Nefertiti is believed to have adopted when she became pharaoh. Nefertiti's thesis was not merely plausible. Now it was proven, the mask that deceived. The quantum examination finally unveiled the veiled narrative behind one of the most celebrated items in history. When King Tutankhamun died suddenly at the age of 19, there was no prepared funeral shroud. With only 70 days until the burial deadline, the clergy faced a utopian task. They could not possibly fabricate a gold shroud weighing over 10 kilograms from scratch in time. But there was another way out. The previous leader, Nefertiti, ruling as Nefer-Nefer-Uaten, had recently passed away, leaving behind a fully completed funerary shroud. The decision, possibly made by Ai, who would later assume power as pharaoh, was audacious. Nefertiti's protection into that of Tutankhamun. The work had to be perfect. The artisans covered her pierced ears with gold pins, meticulously carved her face, preserving the adornment and glass details, and then sculpted a new profile with the young king's features. Using high-compression heat, they joined the new likeness without marking the surface. Finally, they tackled the most sensitive task of all, suppressing his name. Instead of merely scratching it out, which would have been obvious, they hammered the coat of arms until it was level, erasing all traces of Nefer-Nefer-Uaten and then engraved Tutankhamun's symbols. The truth revealed. For 3 millennia, no one suspected a thing. X-rays, the archaeological testing guide for decades, showed no deviation. Only quantum vision, capable of reading the caloric trace of individual atoms, managed to expose the reality. This revelation reconstructs our perception of the history of classical Egypt. If the mask was originally Nefertiti then she was more than a royal wife. She was a pharaoh in her own right, requesting royal funerary trappings and ensuring that her memory would endure. Her erasure was planned, an organized action to remove from memory one of the most influential ladies of Egypt. The discovery also raises disturbing questions. What other objects, long analyzed and accepted, may still hold enigmas invisible to mainstream science? How many truths have remained latent in plain sight, waiting for new ways to reveal them? There is a kind of divine justice in what occurred. Nefertiti was removed from history, her name was erased, her features were altered. Yet, in the end, it was she who took the final step. For a century, the world gazed upon Tutankhamun's golden shield, believing it belonged entirely to the young monarch. In practice, they were admiring his art, his cunning, his desire for eternity that overcame all attempts at exclusion. The face may be Tuti's, but the mask, the metal, the manual skill, the sacred rites, all of that remains hers. For 30 centuries, her mark remained silent, awaiting a science capable of making it tell its story. Today, the mask rests in the Grand Egyptian Museum, contemplated by millions who still don't know what lies beneath the face. They only notice Tutankhamun's calm countenance, without realizing they are facing a disguise, an urgent escape from mortality, and the veiled legacy of a queen who refused to be ignored. Finally, the human race can see what the planet has neglected. The greatest object in history is not merely Tutankhamun's, but Nefertiti's success over time, command, and intentional disposal. Tutankhamun's golden protection has finally revealed a mystery that has been kept secret for 3 millennia. But this is only the beginning. Each piece, each tomb, each ancient item may contain facts we never foresaw, latent beneath coverings of gold, rock, and simulation. What other plots have been buried, waiting for science to expose them? If the protection of a young king could so zealously guard a fraud for ages, what does that reveal about the narratives we think we know? The past is no longer silent, and the next discovery could change everything.